Recorded Future. They help security teams make more confident decisions faster. Recorded Future's technology automates broad collection and analysis of cyber threat data and delivers the rich external context you need to understand alerts and emerging threats. With real-time threat intelligence from Recorded Future, security teams respond to threats 63% faster and find undetected threats 10 times quicker. To get started, go to recordedfuture.com/Security Weekly and sign up for the Recorded Future Cyber Daily. Every day, you'll receive an email with the top results for trending technical indicators, cyber news, exploited vulnerabilities, suspicious IP addresses, and more. Subscribe today and stay ahead of cyber attacks. The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network. Endgame's converged endpoint security platform is transforming security programs. Their people, processes, and technology with the most powerful endpoint protection and simplest user experience, ensuring analysts of any skill level can stop targeted attacks before information theft. Endgame unifies prevention, detection, and threat hunting to stop known and unknown attacker behaviors at scale with a single agent. For more information, visit endgame.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Quick announcement, Ocean is hosting the Rhode Island Cybersecurity Exchange Day on March 13th at the O'Hare Academic Building at Salve Regina University in Newport, Rhode Island. Register now at ocean.org/events. I will be speaking. Patrick, I believe, will be speaking as well. So if you want to come hang out with us here in Rhode Island, that's the time to do it.
Nice.
If you're going to be in Boston or want to go to Boston for SecureWorld, they're hosting their 15th annual conference, March 27th through the 28th at the Heinz Convention Center. Security Weekly listeners will save $100 off a conference pass by visiting SecureWorldExpo.com and using the code Security Weekly. See, I like that because they don't have to do the whole uniform Niner.
Finally a code
Nice.
that is like easy.
Right? Security Weekly. Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. Steve is here with us. Steve Brown. He is the SecureWorld Boston Keynote. He's a former futurist and chief evangelist at Intel Corporation. Steve is an energetic speaker, author, and strategist, and advisor with over 30 years of experience in high tech. Speaking at events across the world, Steve helps his audiences understand the business and societal impacts of new technologies and how they will shape the future 5, 10, 15, and maybe even more years from now. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Good to be here, Paul.
Nice to have you, my friend. So how did you get started in like looking at technology and ultimately like keynoting security events and stuff?
Good question. It probably started when I was about 10, which is 41 years ago now. I was lucky. I mean, kids who are 10 now have been playing with computers since they were, a lot smaller than 10. Back in 1977, when I first got my hands on a computer, my dad worked in the physics department, and he had this amazing box that he brought home from work, and I got to play with. So even at that early age, I figured out that they were going to change the world, and I wasn't quite sure how because I was 10. But it struck me then that these machines were going to grow into something incredibly powerful. And it was really that moment, playing with this Commodore PET computer back in the day, that I became fascinated by the future, and I have been ever since. So long career path at Intel, over 30 years, but eventually ended up as one of Intel's 2 futurists.
Now, did you think that technology would bring us to the day where I'm going to tie physics into this, where my wife is looking at a post on Facebook and it says, oh, due to the way the planets are positioned, you can take your broom and it will stand up straight in your kitchen. And I was like, told my wife, I'm like, you took physics, you also have a technical job. I'm like, think about that. And it was hard for her to like even overcome the fact, like, because it had come from a trusted person. And so right. Everyone was still kind of insisting or playing along with the joke. So me being the party pooper that I am, I did a quick Google search, found this awesome Wired article that explains all of the theories of gravity and physics and basically dispels that. It was actually really interesting. It talked about distance and mass as it relates to gravitational pull, and very scientifically debunked the theory.
And see, I just would have gone to Snopes.
Right. I actually found a very interesting article. So given some of the kind of abuses and kind of like, oh, really, like that's what we're using technology for. Do you have comments on that, how you're observing technology today, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, technology aside, I mean, we've always had people literally selling snake oil, right? People have always fallen for scams and will always fall for scams. And technology is neither good nor bad. It's kind of benign. I can split an atom to power a city or level a city. I can use my smartphone here to call my mum back in England and make her day. Or I could be at a restaurant with you guys and use it to ignore you. So it's how we choose to use technology that matters. And of course, there are always assholes in the world, and they will always use technology to do nasty stuff. And in this case, the technology is being used to mislead people. And the sad news that I've got to bring to you as a futurist is it's going to get a lot worse, because not only will we have trolls out there spewing nonsense and misleading people and creating disinformation campaigns, but artificial intelligence is going to make it possible to create, pretty believable misinformation.
You mean virtual? You're talking about virtual trolls, Steve?
Yes.
With the artificial
AI
intelligence.
Trolls.
Wow. Huh. That's.
Yeah, I mean, look at the work that OpenAI released last week. There was an article in MIT Technology Review, and they've got an AI that will create prose, and sometimes it spews out nonsense because this is early stages.
Right.
But it's able to write a news article, which is, of course, not true, but it can write it in a way that sounds like maybe a human wrote it. And that's where we're at today in 2019. As we head into the early 2020s, this becomes quite worrying. I worry that, I speak a lot around the world, and I always do Q&A. And the number one question is it going to take all our jobs away? Number two question is Skynet going to kill us all? And so a lot of people are really worried about the wrong things. Is Arnie going to drop through a hole from the future and kill us? No. Is AI going to metastasize and be used to create disinformation that leads us to kill ourselves? Maybe.
I think I do this a lot myself because I'm a huge fan of science fiction. We have to remember that it is just that. It is, to a certain degree, fiction, although a lot of the things, especially Star Trek, has a good track record of
bringing fiction to reality.
Correct. I mean, not they themselves, but society has caught up to their science fiction. But when I watch, as a security person, when I watch science fiction, one of the things that goes through my mind is when I see people using all of this tech that is 25 to 100 plus years in the future, the security concerns aren't really there. They're using the technology, for the most part, across all science fiction works, with the understanding or assumption that it's secure. Do you think that's a place that we're headed, Steve, or is this just Hollywood, for example, kind of writing out some of the more complicated things for us to think about so that we can focus on the story and the cool stuff?
Well, let's not disabuse us. I don't think Hollywood does things to make us think. Hollywood does things to make us thrilled, scared, create an emotional response that makes us hand over our $14 or whatever it is to go see a movie. And they do a great job of it. And I would never criticize them for that. I love going to the movies like anybody else. I find it very entertaining. But it's rare that a Hollywood movie is going to make you really think about the implications of technology. There are a few exceptions, Her and other movies.
Television with I'm sure with Black Mirror, Steve, you spent time.
Black Mirror, great example, right? That they really help us think about the potential dark sides of a technology, and that's all good stuff. Utopian sci-fi is not very popular because it's boring.
Yeah,
if Arnie dropped through the hole from the future and said, "Hello, everybody. How are you? Can I make you a cup of tea?" That's. I was trying to be as British as I could there. Then
it worked. Good job.
It's not a very interesting story. But when he starts shooting up the place, Hasta la vista, baby, suddenly you've got a story. And so, as a futurist, that's one of the things I do fight. is that I'm trying to counterbalance against this largely dystopian set of science fiction works out there and say, yeah, of course, we need to worry about that. But as a futurist, you ask two questions. The first one is, what's the future we want to build? And what's the future we want to avoid? And I think we spend a lot of time, and of course, your audience, you're pre-programmed to think about what's the future we want to avoid. That's the business that you're in. And I'm so glad that you all are. I'm trying to think also about what are the possibilities of the future? What could we build? What kind of value could we create for people?
And at what point, if any, does the future we want to build and the future we want to avoid collide?
I mean, great question. That happens if we don't have a robust conversation about it. And I think it shouldn't just be a conversation that people like me have. I spend my time thinking about the world 5, 10, 15, sometimes beyond that, depends on the client I'm working with, and helping to stimulate that conversation with them. But this is a conversation that we as a society should be having. There's always this interplay of culture and technology, and one informs the other over time. When I do my talks, I often will finish by saying, I deputize you all as futurists now. You need to go out and start having these conversations with your friends, with your family. What is the future that we want? Because we're getting to a point, technology is moving so rapidly that it's not quite there yet, but if you can imagine it, we will build it. And so what do we want? And it's not always a question that we stop and ask ourselves.
So I've had this conversation, Stephen. I want to get your take on it. When we talk about Internet of Things security, right? And we've been talking about this for some time, even before they called it the Internet of Things. But when I look at technology, and I'll use the home as an example, I think this could certainly apply to businesses as well. But in your home, there was one of the first technology breakthroughs that we have, electricity, right? I think probably shortly thereafter, we had fire alarms and a standard for ways to monitor for smoke and fire in those precautions in our homes. Plumbing is the same way. We have modern plumbing and then safeguards and precautions as to how it's built into homes. When we add the Internet of Things to homes today, it's mostly an add-on that we're adding on afterwards and it looks different, right? All the different technology we're trying to bring together in the home to make a so-called smart home. What happens when these technologies we're talking about that we're adding on today become standard in all of the homes and buildings and well, businesses, much like plumbing and electricity and the way we monitor for fire?
Yeah, a lot of this technology is being built for a price point. In my house here, I can turn the lights off behind me with my voice. I can move my blinds up and down. I've got some levels of automation in my house because I'm a futurist. I better. But this technology is not. It's deliberately does it hit a price point, and if you're hitting a price point, maybe you're not either putting the components in that you need to be able to build security in end to end, or you're not spending the labor that's needed to have a security expert oversee it and make sure that you're doing a proper job of thinking both about privacy and security. And so it's a big risk. And as to your point, I think you're making, which is as this scales out and more people start to adopt this technology, not just bold futurists, we start to see it everywhere. Then you start to create an attack surface that's really attractive. Right. So the same way that people used to go after PCs for a long time because Macs didn't have, there weren't enough of them to make it worthwhile. Eventually, we'll get to a point where there will be a common platform out there that will become attractive for people to go and attack.
And I think we've started to see that already, especially with televisions, that I think as many of us in technology predicted, they're not just televisions anymore. They're actually small computers that have a screen that are attached to your wall. And my theory was that people would start caring about the security of things when something like their TV would start to display pop-up ads, right? To me, that's how it happened on the browser. People said, I need antivirus software because I went to this porn site and now I'm on 24 porn sites and this is bad. I need some protection from that. I think our televisions are heading down the same route. We have seen some attacks. There's also been, you mentioned privacy, ways to break into the televisions and snoop on what people are watching or spy on the people through the cameras that are now in the television. So do you think there'll be drivers like that, Steve, that will help shape our future in a more secure manner and allow people to care about the security of the things that maybe they haven't considered before, like a television?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. Are we frogs that slowly boil in water, or is there some incident or set of incidents that makes us go, hell no?
Right.
This week's revelation about cameras in nests. Yeah. That's got some people's attention.
It was the microphones. We had a story about that. The microphones.
Sorry,
were
a microphone, not a camera. But the idea that I can't say her name. She's here listening. Okay, I've muted her. Now I can say Voldemort's name. So the Alexa case where Amazon Echoes were making random phone calls on people's behalves and recording sounds and sending them to their friends. And that was a bug, and it was the same as a butt dial essentially, but it was a high-tech butt dial.
Right.
So those got people's attention. But I suspect that we will continue on this merry path until somebody gets really hurt. I think that's when it will be. I mean, we really all paid attention when the woman with the bike got hit by the Uber. That's when life is threatened, then people wake up.
But I feel like folks are making the decision today to implement this technology. We talked Amazon Echo services, right? I speak to like a few different types of people about this technology, Steve. And one is the camp of, I would never have that in my house. Like, it's too risky.
Yep.
In my assessment, they really don't understand why, right? Then there's the people that will use the technology and they're like, yeah, that's like a nice to have and not really consider it. Like, they wouldn't not have it, but they're not, they'll use it as a commodity function, right? And then, there are the people like us who will implement it, try and understand the security implications and use the technology. How do we educate all of the audiences so that we're on the same level of, like, we need to all understand it? Like, just not using it without truly understanding why you're making that decision, to me, is an opportunity to educate and make people aware of some issues.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons I have a job, right? Because I get asked these questions all the time. Is it safe to have this kind of stuff in my home? What questions should I be asking? Maybe we need to go a little bit broader than that, because we're mixing two things here. We've been talking about privacy and we've been talking about security. There is no kind of consumer standard that says, this is safe to use in your home. This has been passed, and somebody independently has tested it and decided that this meets some level of security standards.
Right. That ties into privacy, though. I think unknowingly on the person, they're fearful that the technology is not secure, and therefore a bad actor is going to take over that technology and use it to invade their privacy, right? Then there's the other side of that privacy coin, which we cover all the time, the Amazons and Googles and Apples of the world basically violate your privacy, whether on purpose or sometimes on accident, and that happens too.
Yeah, and I think people are starting to figure that out. I mean, it comes down to which brand do you trust,
right?
And what's their business model? If you're Apple, you're in a business model of selling $1,000 plus shiny phones. If you are Facebook, you're in the business model of monetizing people's lives. And I think people are starting to recognize that pretty closely now.
Absolutely. Matt,
so
anyone else? Lee?
I had a question. Yeah.
We talked
what do you
a lot about
sorry.
Go ahead.
IoT, but there's, if we think about the next wave, right? IDC talks about the fourth platform. We're talking fifth, sixth, seventh platform here. What is, I'm a curmudgeon, so I don't use any of these IoT devices pretty much in my daily life because I don't trust them. But think about autonomous vehicles and machines. Think about some of these other aspects that we're going to see in our lives. I'm a driver, right? I want to feel 600 horsepower under my feet. Some people are going to be like, yeah, no, let somebody drive me. There's a lot of other things here that are going to impact our life beyond just whether it's a Nest, a thermostat, a Ring doorbell, et cetera. I mean, there's broader implications of what's coming. I'm curious how those play into this future discussion.
Sure. And this is what I'm going to talk about in the keynote I do at SecureWorld. Is to really get into what are the 6 technologies that are going to shape the next decade. I would argue that over the last 4 decades, there were 4 big technologies that businesses had to comprehend. The PC revolution starting in 1981, the advent of the web and having to open a new front door for business on the web, the mobile revolution, and then cloud. And there were 4 big juicy things that, and you can argue little ones here and there, but those are the 4 big ones. We have 6 big ones coming in the next decade. So it is going to lead to unprecedented change in every business sector and in the way we live our lives. And you're right, autonomous machines is a big part of that. Augmented reality, artificial intelligence, blockchain technology, Internet of Things, 5G networking, all of these are going to play together to allow us to reimagine the way every business operates. Now, there's a positive side to that, which is being able to deliver services in new ways, being able to create new types of products, to service customers in new ways, all good stuff. And I can talk about that all day. And it will help us to improve the productivity of agriculture. It will help us improve the quality of people's lives, improve people's health.
But Steve, will it get healthcare off of the fax machine? That's what I want to know.
God, let's hope so. Yeah.
or out of paper records, for crying out loud. Right?
Yeah. I'm going for my, I'm a man of a certain age, so I've got to have my checkup tomorrow. And the amount of paperwork I still have to fill in. I was arguing with my wife last night, who works in healthcare, how ridiculous it all is. Anyway, to your point, I mean, once a machine, when you take AI, you can use it to create a fancy algorithm. Once you put that inside a machine, you give that machine autonomy. You give it the ability to have agency in the world. And what you're doing is taking a digital threat and making it physical. And so now instead of having the risk of being hacked, having your identity exposed, having data, important data stolen, now you have the ability to take a 1-ton missile and hurl it into a group of nuns if they happen to be walking down the street. So it is a very different scenario once you start to take digital intelligence and put it inside autonomous machines. And we are moving to a world of many, many millions of autonomous machines filling our lives.
What do nuns say when they're walking down the street and someone hurls a grenade at them? I feel like there's a joke in there somewhere, but holy shit, I guess. I don't know. Lee, go ahead, Lee.
Holy something, but I'm not quite sure what it is.
Hold on, Matt. Hold on, Lee, and then Matt.
Yeah. So in this future, we're envisioning. Steve, do you see a message that's not getting through, as it were, a warning that people are ignoring passively or aggressively? That's going to, that we should be paying attention to, or is it really the field's open and anything could happen?
I think most people are busy living their lives, and it's going to be down to the people that listen to this podcast to take on that role and keep people safe, because people are busy bringing up children and taking them to sports games and getting to work on time. They already have enough to think about, and I don't think anything, asking earlier about, can we educate people about this stuff? How do we get them to think about this stuff? I don't think that's probably the right question to ask. It would be nice. It would be lovely if everybody would think about this stuff. I just don't think it's realistic, which means it's going to fall upon unsung heroes, honestly. The security people who work in every company in America to keep people safe and to ask the tough questions. And unfortunately, it's a little bit like, I see people who work in IT security as being kind of like nurses and teachers, in that they are some of the most important people in our society. And we kind of know they're important, but we don't really reward them enough. We don't really say thank you enough, because it is going to become an increasing challenge in the next decade. And we can get into that in a few minutes. But it is going to be something that security folk need to work hard at, because I don't think it's realistic to ask people to pay attention.
Yeah, to my point, right? This is where the consumer, I don't think, has the care or the expertise to worry about it, right? To your point, Steve.
Yeah.
We're busy, right? And we're going to use an app because it makes my life easier. I'm going to use mobile deposits. I'm going to, use these different technologies, not thinking about the ramifications, because I don't have time to think about the impacts to my life, my privacy, etc. And so I don't see this as a problem that the consumer really embraces and tries to decide whether it's good or bad. I think it's companies who are rolling out these services to say, we've added layers of security in here to really make it secure for consumers to use so they don't have to think about it. And I think that's the big challenge with this new evolution of technologies that we have to think about.
Yeah, and it comes down to a brand, right? How do you choose something based on a brand that you trust? Brands are fundamentally all about trust. And so the technology companies that build products that you can trust, people will go back to over and over. And if you violate that trust, then people aren't going to come back. Or at least they'll give you maybe one chance and then it's all done.
And where does transparency play into that level of trust? Because we've had some conversations about Apple recently, right, with the FaceTime bug, and not a lot of discussion about it, but fixes for it. Now they're getting sued for their two-factor authentication. Does transparency and the ability to be a little more transparent play into that? Because Apple hasn't been very transparent personally in some of these activities, because I think they're trying to build a level of trust. But I think transparency also builds a level of trust also. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, of course, transparency matters. And particularly when it comes to privacy, very often now we're giving up our data in return for some value, some service, some level of personalization. And there's a quid pro quo there. And so long as a brand is honest about, this is the data that I gather, this is what I do with it, this is the value I give you in return, this is how I keep the data, this is how I secure the data, then we're generally okay with it. It's when it's not clear that that data is being gathered, it's when it is used in a way that we might perceive as being used against us, that brands get into hot water.
Yeah. And obviously we've seen the Facebook issues and some other things, right? Which is why I don't have a Facebook account. But I mean, my wife still uses it today because it allows her to connect to family and keep everybody apprised. She doesn't care about the privacy concerns, but I do. So I don't use it, right? And I mean, that's the kind of level of trust we're talking about, I think, in the future with some of these technologies.
It's interesting to see how consumer behavior is changing and modifying to create defensive strategies against these companies, though. Millennials get a lot of grief about, not caring about their privacy and their data. They actually do. They're pretty aware. And, they start to do things that they only share what they want Facebook to know, or whatever social platform they're on. They know that data is not ephemeral, that, if they give it to Snapchat, they're not deleting it all, right? They're smart enough to realize that. And they've started to create counter strategies to almost provide disinformation to these networks, or to provide very limited information so that it's not very useful to these networks.
I agree, Steve. I think we saw a big shift in social media, especially when we first started covering social media here on this show. Larry was certainly here for that.
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot of people making some grave mistakes. And as security people, we were like, well, yeah, if you put it on the internet, right? But I think, as Steve said, over time, people have gotten very savvy about, what's largely because there have been so many news stories and breaches and leaks and all. They've seen other people's personal data being abused in one way or another. And as Steve said, have gone through, I mean, very much hacker mindset to be able to use the social media technologies, right? If you're in junior high or high school, you're using a phone with these technologies, but somehow protect their personal data as best they know how.
Yeah, and I think because people are getting a little smarter on this stuff, I'm hoping this will all sort itself out. There are other things that I worry about that as I look out through the next decade, you know, when you can spoof sensors, when you can use adversarial examples on an AI, where you can use generation adversarial networks to create fake content and mislead people. And as we're going to embed technology much more deeply in the workplace in the next decade, and we're moving to an era where our teams will be teams of humans and non-humans working together. So now we need to think
against
about
each other, Steve, in that respect, right? I mean, you talk about artificial intelligence as being artificial trolls as an example, but also on the defensive realm, we'll have artificial intelligence that will be able to detect the artificially intelligent trolls, and there'll be a cat and mouse game like there usually is in security, right?
Oh yeah, we've got an arms race coming. I think it was Gartner said that by 2022, they predict that AI's ability to spot and flag fake content will be outstripped by AI's ability to create fake content.
Interesting, yeah.
So there's a worrying date.
Right, and how accurate is that? Right. Or
yeah.
will it be? Yeah.
How you come up with that, I don't know. To me, that's
right.
what
Yeah.
does, right? I mean, and they do it very well. But whether it's 2022 or 2025 or 2030, at some point that may happen. In which case, seeing no longer is believing.
Yeah. I find it interesting having been somewhat of a victim. Well, being protected by some of that certainly where we put our content, but also being a victim of it and having our content wrongly categorized in such a way that our channel gets blocked or taken down, and we have to go through a process. What concerns me most, I think, about the future, Steve, in technology is who in what organizations are going to control the content, right? And so today, and so again, I've been a victim of this, right? So as an example, I've got a cigar podcast. Facebook's rules state you can't take out ads that promote the sale of tobacco. When I try and take out an ad, every single time they kill it because they think we're selling tobacco. And I'm like, no, we just have a show that's talking about tobacco.
Right.
And then we've seen this in many different cases, right? We've seen Tumblr's decision to restrict adult content. We've seen Reddit's decision to go the complete opposite way and allow everything. But in the future, who's going to control what's out there? Because sure, I could go create my own social network, but it's nowhere near as impactful and of benefit to me if I'm not on YouTube versus I have my own video hosting site,
right?
For example, right? Who's going to control it in the future, Steve?
Well, that's why decentralized platforms are looking to be very interesting. If you're suffering from centralized control with a centralized agent that's making decisions that maybe not everybody agrees with, then decentralized platforms are emerging. You have YouTube, which is a centralized platform under a mega corporation of Alphabet, or you have DTube, which is fully decentralized based on blockchain, which actually rewards people who post content that is popular and widely shared. So you get cryptocurrency in return, tokens in return, and it's completely decentralized. So the community decides what goes. So we're going through a shift. I mean, blockchain has been around now for 10 years? As a technology, it's really only just starting to find its feet and solve problems, including things like maybe delivering us decentralized platforms so that you can talk about your cigars freely.
Questions, comments from others?
So I had a question.
Go, Lee.
When you're talking about AI getting better at creating believable content, I was thinking, with the movement for, short communication, the SMS, 280 characters, 140 characters, does that help or hurt that?
I mean, it's probably easier to create 140 character convincing communication than it is to create 1,000 words of prose. But I mean, this stuff is already getting so good that it can create pretty believable video at this point. And this is 2019. Within 2 years, it's going to look great. So I'm worried about all manner of communications. And if you can create believable 15-minute videos where somebody sounds and looks like the person, but it isn't, 140 characters is easy.
Well, I was wondering about that.
Trouble.
I was asking because I was thinking about how far out the time horizon it'd be, and I was thinking if they could do that now, it wouldn't be that many years out.
Yeah, and if your viewers haven't, excuse me, I'm just choking on my whiskey here. If your viewers haven't looked at this yet, I mean, just Google deep fake Obama, deep fake George Bush, and see what was possible 2 years ago. And it'll give you a feel for where the technology is today. What it means is you have a completely different type of threat to your company. You're not worrying now about someone penetrating your enterprise with a phishing attack, a Trojan, a virus, whatever malware it might be. Now what you have to worry about is somebody attacking your brand and using disinformation, misinformation to mischaracterize your company and do you damage without ever getting inside your organization. It is a new game and a new type of attack that you're going to have to start worrying about. And what it means, how you counteract that, you need to start, we all need to start thinking about taking digital forensics technology very seriously. How do we validate that content is real, that it comes from the person that it says it comes from? Because potentially every brand on the planet is now at risk.
I think it's a little bigger than that, Steve, right? Because think about a deep fake of a president making a statement that tanks the stock market. I mean, this is bigger than just an individual company. I mean, this could be used in a much more holistic way across our economy, across the world. I mean, this is scary kind of stuff because, what deepfake did is pretty realistic. And I mean, if we think about Murphy's Law, I mean, we're close in the next year or so to having this be so realistic that it could make major implications for our entire society or economy.
Yeah, you're right. And I tailored my remarks knowing who watches this podcast. But yeah, this has much broader implications. That OpenAI example I mentioned earlier with the AI that wrote a fake news story, OpenAI is holding that code. They don't think it's a smart move to release it because it could be weaponized. The example they gave was a news release talking about how Russia had fired missiles at the US. And the US was responding. Yeah, what would that do to the stock market if it looked like it came from Reuters?
Agreed. Or AP or any of those other news sources.
Right. So this comes down to how do we validate and trust our sources, which is kind of the root problem that disinformation on Facebook comes back to, is people are not checking their sources. If it comes from, internetnewsnow.com versus AP, people don't really look at the difference.
That's very true.
Scary.
So I have a scary proposition or a scary question or something of the like. And, tying a lot of things that we've talked about together about, quote, what does that time horizon look like? And, me thinking about the security and, thinking about, I don't have those things in my house because I don't trust those technologies versus some of us that do. I grew up my science fiction beginnings were on the quote GURPS cyberpunk type of stuff, where you could take the computer and you could jack it directly into your brain, and then you could have this quote augmented reality and alternate realities and all of those types of things, you know, and looking to the future.
We have that today, but it's mostly used for porn.
Right. but you can't jack the computer into your brain, but you know, how
depends
far,
on where you think your brain is, Larry.
Well, all right, good point. And I mean, if you put your brain in that, wait, never mind. But how far are we off from that, and what does that reality look like? And is it terrifying or is it amazing? Because I want it to be amazing. Because sign me up.
Well, it comes back to what's the future you want to build and what's the future you want to avoid, right?
Yeah.
We need to have that conversation. What are we trying to build? We're still a ways away. I mean, I worked at Intel for over 30 years. 5-7 years ago, there were, pretty good research efforts into brain-machine interfaces. You've got Elon Musk saying Neuralink is, a project that they're putting lots of money into, and he's promising all kinds of advances there. From what I can tell, we are still a ways away from being able to strap on a helmet and have our thoughts extracted and uploaded to the cloud. And
I thought that was Second Life.
Control devices, right?
Was that Second Life?
Well,
I guess without the neural interface.
Yep.
But when you have a neural interface, my guess it's going to look very much like Second Life.
Hey, sign me up.
But let's talk about augmented reality for a bit, because that's another area that we need to think about. We're moving towards an era of what I call augmented work, and we can talk about the broader landscape of that, kind of moving from physical work to knowledge work to augmented work. And I'll talk about that in my keynote at SecureWorld. But you have this idea of creating a hybrid worker, somebody who is a combination of physical intelligence, human physicality, and then digital intelligence. And the best way to show a human what to do next, for a digital intelligence to show a human what to do next, is using the visual cortex, to be able to use augmented reality to show a robot repair worker, unscrew this, pull this connector out, insert this, and to be able to show them what to do physically next. It's kind of real-time training. If that becomes the norm, if we start to be using augmented reality in the workplace, and about 80% of workers are hands-free, whether you're a surgeon or a construction worker, right? 80% of people do not sit at desks. And that's not like the people on this podcast and me, right? So 80% of people would benefit perhaps from having a hands-free, click-free experience, which is about gesture and voice and augmented reality. You play that forward, now I can think about this hybrid worker who is a combination of human and digital intelligence as a target that I can hack. Because I can hack that person's perception, I can maybe lead them to do something they wouldn't otherwise have done. So now I have another level of threat. If you are interested in any of that sort of stuff, and sounds like you all like science fiction, there's an interesting short book called Sycamore. There's a follow-up called Sycamore 2. It's kind of about what happens when augmented reality goes crazy.
Heading to Audible right now.
There was a movie about that too, right? Where you had a clone and you could walk around as your clone. What was that? Who was in that? Anyway, it'll come to me later. Surrogates. Was that what it's called? Surrogates? Yeah.
Surrogates with Bruce Willis, yeah.
Bruce Willis. That's who it was, yes. Thank you, Steve.
I'm your movie guy. Whatever you want to know. I'm here.
That's awesome. So we'll switch into TV for a moment. Some of my most favorite episodes of Black Mirror, I think, most accurately predict the future, or at least speculate about the future based on today's current conditions of folks posting on social media, folks trolling or posting responses on social media. There's 2 episodes in particular. I don't want to ruin it for our audience, but what are the societal impacts of technology in that respect? Do you think that we'll do a better job of policing that in the future so we don't go to those extremes, where you get rewards points for acting like a a good citizen, or you're not killed if you're not trolling someone on, or making fun of someone on social media. Do you how does society play into those technology changes, as that is the way that we primarily communicate today, and probably more so in the future?
I was thrilled when Netflix picked up Black Mirror and gave it a broad audience, because it meant that more people were thinking about this stuff. I think it's really important as a society that we kind of go not to the fringes, but almost to the extremes, and look at the corner cases of an idea and explore the dark side as well as the good side.
Mm-hmm.
The danger is we become so afraid of the dark side that we throw away the opportunity on the good side.
Yeah, that's true.
If we are all so afraid of AI that we say, no, that's it, no more AI, you're potentially denying millions of people a cure for cancer or Alzheimer's, perhaps including yourself or grandpa or even your kids, right? There will be such incredible benefits. AI is a very powerful tool. You can use that tool to do some really nasty stuff, or you can use it to unlock the secrets of the universe, discover powerful new drugs, create new wonder materials.
Make your broom stand up magically in your living room.
Exactly. Let's hope that we can do that. But my point is, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Because
I said that to my 2-year-old, and he gave me a dirty look. And I'm trying to explain to a 2-year-old that it's an expression. He doesn't get it. He was very mad at me. He was like, Dad, don't throw me away. I'm like, no. It's just never mind. My wife's just looking at me shaking her head, me trying to explain that to my 2-year-old. Yeah, I know it's interesting, when you say that, Stephen. I put people in different categories of, the ones that watch Black Mirror, and I think even before they see something like that, have made the decision, I'm not going to have the voice activation, I'm not going to have the AI, I'm not going to let my kid, they're very just opposed to everything without understanding the impacts. But what I think we're here to do as the security community is allow people, we realized, I think really early on, that we have to allow people to use technology, but do that in a secure way. And I think that's what scares us the most about the future is, for me, it's twofold. How do we allow people to use technology securely, and how do we keep up with criminals and the bad actors in the way that they're going to use technology in ways we never would have thought, right? I mean, I think today when we look at the dark web and we look at the various techniques criminals are using, what they're doing with the information they're stealing, how they're monetizing it, there's some really creative things in there. And those are the two things that scare me the most, is protecting people and also trying to keep tabs on criminals, which is something that we haven't really discussed yet.
There's a big difference between caution and fear, right? I think it's important that we all think about these things, especially in the security world. There's a community of people who need to live in a scary world and think about worst case and try and outthink adversaries and nip things off before they can happen. For the general population, I think they should not be afraid. They need to be cautious and just mindful. Because if we all slip into fear, one, it's not a good place to be. But two, it may slow us down as a species. And I don't want that.
Questions for Steve? Anyone else?
I got mine.
Steve, are you ready to play 5 questions with Security
You bet.
Weekly? Sweet.
How does this work? You ask me 5 questions, I give you 5
yes.
answers?
So here's how it works. I ask you 5 questions, Steve. There is no right or wrong answer. Larry will also give you some coaching during the 5 questions.
At least on one specific.
As well. Yes. Yep. Some are free-form answer, some are multiple choice. So if you're ready, question 1 is 3 words to describe yourself.
Bald. Chocolate lover. There you go.
See, I like tall, handsome, and a liar.
There you go. Steve, if you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
AI.
Ooh.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Unicycling fool. How about that?
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
Sorry, say that again?
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second? It's a very futuristic game, Steve.
It is, and I have to
And we
think,
can't even get them on the European rules one.
They shouldn't ask grabbing in the future, right? So, is it a trick question because there isn't any ask grabbing in the future? I don't know.
Steve is really
On point,
smart,
on
right?
point.
See,
Or defense.
the futurists always figure that out.
Yep. Steve, most of our American guests or Native American guests don't get it, and we always tell them, "Well, it's really popular in Europe, so we can't even use that one on you."
It's just a different set of rules in Europe,
Yeah,
really.
yeah. So,
Well, it depends on which country in Europe.
Exactly.
Northern
It
Europe,
does.
not so much. Southern Europe, yeah, probably a bit more.
The rules change.
yes.
So, Steve, first or second?
Say it again?
First or second?
Oh, first.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
2 celebrities to be my parents. Goodness. Is this where you give me some coaching, give me some ideas here?
Well, our most popular answer is Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt.
Yes.
So an Oedipus
Yeah.
complex is perfectly okay.
I really like Betty
They
White.
don't
and
fit you though, Steve. So
No.
don't go there.
Mine are Betty White and Robert Downey Jr. Mostly as Iron Man, rather than the actual Robert Downey Jr. But
It would probably be somebody who could make me good wine. So probably a good winemaker would be one parent.
I don't know any
And then,
famous sommeliers. Famous sommeliers.
Well, they only serve the wine.
famous sommeliers for 200, Alex.
George Hendry. I mean, I can think of a few. They're a little.
Hold on, this one.
you know.
Francis Coppola, was he a sommelier? Is that the
No.
wine we're drinking?
Coppola
tonight?
has a winery. I don't.
No.
I mean, he had wineries, so
Right.
But he had somebody else make them for him.
All right, so we're at a someone who could make me really good wine, and
And
There are no limitations due to gender either. We don't. Again, there's no
Oh, that's
right
true,
or
yeah.
wrong. No right or wrong
we're in the
answer.
future where 2 guys can have a baby. Is that the, the
we're
deal?
we're in the now. Where
We're
two
in the
guys
now.
can-
Yes, that is now.
right? I mean,
Or maybe one could carry the baby in the future. Maybe is what Steve's
Does it
referring
have to be a human? Could one of my parents
No.
be perhaps a super AI? That would be fun.
what, sure,
I mean,
why
who
not?
better
Why not?
Good advice on
Sure.
dating than a super AI.
Sure, why not?
A super AI with a winemaker twist.
That'd be.
Interesting.
They could make
Yep.
together. They could make the best wine.
That's right. Crowdsource it through AI.
That is now my new favorite answer.
Yes, I like that very much.
Someone who
Steve.
can make great wine in a super AI.
I mean, there is no right or wrong answers, but we will judge all of your answers, I guess is what we're saying.
We won't judge you on the ask grabby one, but the parents, yes.
We won't judge you. We'll judge your answers, basically. How about that? Steve, now, so when is your upcoming keynote? It is Secure World Boston, and that is happening. There's a lot of conferences back to back.
27th
Yes.
to 20th of March, yeah.
Okay.
In the Heinz Convention Center, I'm told.
Oh,
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
he's
where it'll be.
on day 1 opening keynote, I believe,
Sweet.
and also doing some plus content in a workshop beforehand.
Yeah, they have me do like a 5 or 6 hour workshop. So the structure of the workshop, for those who are interested, come and spend some time with me. We can get into some stuff. I talk about AI and what are the applications of AI, how does it work, how does it solve business problems, and then I do a whole section on blockchain. What are the applications of blockchain? Why is it important? It's not just about cryptocurrency. How does it let you do distributed platforms? How does it let you create value by bringing people together in different ways? And then I actually run what's called a future casting session. Future casting sessions are a sort of 1 to 3 day effort to explore the future. We do a kind of little mini version in the workshop so people can understand the concept and apply some of the things that they've learned about AI and blockchain and start to imagine the future in a kind of structured way. So it's a
Sweet.
fun little plus session that we do on the other day. It's it's fun. So I'd love to see you there. Come and
Awesome.
spend some time with me.
I will probably see you there. If you're there on the first day, I will probably be there on day one.
Are you going to be there?
Yeah, I will be there, yes.
Oh,
We'll
great.
be there,
Okay.
both of us.
Bring
Yeah,
whiskey.
Matt will be there too.
Bring whiskey.
We'll have whiskey. We always have whiskey.
We'll have
Wherever we go,
whiskey. We'll bring
I'm
it.
in.
Yeah,
I'm
we're
in.
going to
You have
drive
your
it up
whiskey.
from Rhode Island or
There you go.
wherever.
Yeah, and then we can go to dinner at Strip by Strega, my favorite restaurant. So, yes. Awesome, Steve. Thank you so much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly. Make sure that you visit SecureWorldExpo.com. Use the code Security Weekly. With that, we'll take a short break. Come back with the security news for this week.